faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. But on June 16th, 1959, Superman wasn't faster than a speeding bullet. George Reeves was found naked on his bed, a German Luger pistol on the floor, a single bullet hole in his right temple. His fiancée and 3 guests were drinking downstairs when they heard the shot. The police ruled it suicide. Case closed. But here's what doesn't add up. There were nitrogen monoxide fingerprints on the gun. No gunpowder residue on his hands. TWO extra bullet holes in the bedroom floor that nobody could explain. And his fiancée? She waited 45 minutes to call the police, 65 years later. We still don't know who killed Superman. But before we get to that night, let me tell you about the boy who would become the Man of Steel and the lies that shaped his entire life. January 5th, 1914. Woolstock, Iowa, a tiny farming town in the middle of nowhere. George Kiefer Brewer was born to Helen Lesher and Donald Brewer. But here's the first lie. George's mother told him his birthday was April 5th, not January 5th. Why? Because she got pregnant before marriage, and she wanted to hide the scandal. George's parents divorced when he was just a baby. He never met his biological father again. His mother Helen remarried a man named Frank Basolo, who adopted young George. But Helen was complicated dot when George was a teenager. His mother told him that his stepfather Frank had committed suicide. George was devastated, but it was another lie. Frank Basolo was very much alive. Helen just didn't want to share her son with anyone else. George wouldn't learn the truth until he was an adult. By then, the damage was done. Growing up in Pasadena, George became a handsome young man. 6'2", 190 pounds of muscle. He took up boxing and was so good, he qualified for the Golden Gloves tournament. But his mother forbade him to compete. She was terrified he would damage his pretty face dot, so George gave up boxing and took up acting instead. His mother's wish would come true. But at what cost? In 1939, George Reeves appeared in one of the biggest movies ever made. You've definitely seen it, but you probably don't remember him in it. Gone with the Wind, the biggest movie of 1939. George Reeves played Stuart Tarleton, one of Scarlett O'Hara's suitors in the very first scene. That it should have been his big break. Warner Brothers signed him to a contract. The future looked bright, but Hollywood is cruel. For the next 10 years, George bounced between studios. Small roles, forgettable movies. Always the second choice, never the star. When World War II broke out, George enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He performed in a Broadway show called Winged Victory and made training films. He thought the war might reset his career, It didn't. After the war, the studios had moved on. George was approaching 40 with nothing to show for it. He was so broke. He took a job digging cesspools to pay the bills. The man who would become Superman was digging holes in the ground for minimum wage, And then everything changed. A producer called with an offer. It wasn't much money. The role seemed silly, but George Reeves said yes and became an American icon overnight. In 1951, producer Robert Maxwell offered George the role of Clark Kent in a low-budget movie called Superman and the Mole Men. The pay was terrible. The costume was padded and uncomfortable. Most serious actors would have said no. George said yes. He needed the money. The movie led to a television series. Adventures of Superman premiered in 1952, and suddenly, George Reeves was the most famous man in America. Got children across the country tuned in every week to watch him fight crime. He made personal appearances where thousands of kids would line up just to meet him. There's a famous story, maybe true, maybe legend, about a boy who brought his father's loaded gun to meet Superman. The kid wanted to test if Superman was really bulletproof. George convinced the boy to hand over the weapon by saying the bullets might bounce off and hurt someone else. He took his role model status seriously. He quit smoking so children wouldn't see Superman with a cigarette. He never appeared with his girlfriends at public events. But behind the cape, George Reeves was miserable. The role that made him famous was also destroying him. And then he fell in love with the wrong woman. A woman whose husband had connections to the mob. Her name was Toni Mannix. She was a former Ziegfeld Follies showgirl, glamorous, seductive. 8 years older than George, she was also married to Eddie Mannix. Eddie Mannix was the vice president of MGM Studios. But his real job? He was a fixer. When movie stars got into trouble, scandals, crimes, embarrassments, Eddie made the problems disappear. The rumors said he had connections to organized crime. People who crossed Eddie Mannix had a way of ending up dead. And yet, Eddie knew about his wife's affair with George Reeves. He didn't seem to mind. He had his own mistress. It was an open secret in Hollywood. Toni showered George with gifts. She bought him a house, a car, expensive clothes. For 8 years, she was his sugar mama, and he was her kept man. The press never reported on the relationship. Nobody wanted to cross Eddie Mannix. But in 1958, George met someone new, Leonore Lemon, a New York socialite, younger, wild, beautiful. George broke up with Toni, and Toni lost her mind. She called him day and night. She parked outside his house for hours, watching. She made threats. George had to get a restraining order against the woman who had supported him for nearly a decade. And Eddie Mannix? According to those who knew him, Eddie was furious that someone had broken his wife's heart 3 days before his wedding. On his happiest night, George Reeves would be dead. What happened in that house has never been explained. June 15th, 1959. George Reeves had every reason to live. He had just signed a contract for a new season of Superman, with a raise. He was supposed to direct some episodes himself. He had an exhibition boxing match scheduled with champion Archie Moore. He had bought $4,000 in traveler's checks for his honeymoon in Spain. And in 3 days, he was going to marry Leonore Lemon. That night, George and Leonore went out for dinner. They came home around 11. A writer named Robert Condon was staying as a house guest. George went to bed, but Leonore kept the party going. Around 1 in the morning, 2 more friends showed up, Carole Van Ronkel and William Bliss. They banged on the door until Leonore let them in. George came downstairs in his bathrobe, furious. According to the witnesses, George yelled at them for a while, then calmed down. He had a drink, and then he went back upstairs. What Leonore said next still haunts this case. He's going upstairs to shoot himself. The guests laughed. They thought she was joking. And they heard a drawer opening. He's getting the gun now, Leonore said. A single shot rang out. See? I told you. He's shot himself. 45 minutes later, someone finally called the police. When officers arrived, they found George Reeves naked on his bed. A German Luger pistol lay on the floor between his feet. A single bullet had entered his right temple. The case was ruled alone. Suicide within hours. But nothing about this scene made sense. The evidence tells 3 different stories: suicide, accident, murder. After 65 years, we still can't tell which one is true. Here's what the police found and what they ignored. The gun had nitrogen monoxide fingerprints. None. How do you shoot yourself without touching the gun? There was nitrogen monoxide gunpowder residue on George's hands. Police never tested for it. They said it wasn't standard procedure in 1959. The shell casing was found under his body. How does that happen if you shoot yourself while lying down? There were TWO extra bullet holes in the bedroom floor. Leonor claimed they were from an old argument. Nobody investigated further. George had bruises on his head and body. Nobody explained them, and his fiancée predicted his death. Step by step, as it happened, there are 3 theories. Theory 1, suicide. George was depressed about being typecast as Superman. He saw no future. He took his own life. Theory 2, Leonor did it. She was drunk. They argued. She shot him, either accidentally or on purpose. The 45-minute delay was to cover it up. Theory 3, Toni Mannix ordered a hit. His mob connections made it easy. His wife's heart was broken, and Eddie always fixed his wife's problems. Permanently. Years later, an LA publicist claimed that Toni Mannix confessed on her deathbed. She told the priest that she had George killed. She was afraid of going to hell, but by then, everyone who could confirm or deny it was already dead. George Reeves was buried at Mountain View Cemetery in Altadena, California. His gravestone reads, "My beloved son, Superman." His mother never believed it was suicide. She hired private detectives. She demanded answers. She never got them. He was 45 years old. He had survived a domineering mother, a struggling career, Hollywood's cruelty, and a dangerous love triangle. But he couldn't survive that one night in Benedict Canyon, in 2006. Ben Affleck played George Reeves in the film Hollywoodland. The movie explored all 3 theories and solved nothing. Today, the Superman curse lives on. Christopher Reeve, the next Superman, was paralyzed in a horse-riding accident. Dean Cain, Brandon Routh, Henry Cavill, all saw their careers stall after wearing the cape. But maybe there is no curse. Maybe there's just Hollywood, a town that builds you up and tears you down. George Reeves wanted to be remembered as a serious actor. Instead, he's remembered for how he died, faster than a speeding bullet, but not fast enough to escape the darkness that was coming for him. And the question remains, who killed Superman? What do you think happened that night? Suicide? Accident? Murder? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. If you want more Hollywood mysteries, hit that subscribe button. Next week, Natalie Wood, the actress who was terrified of water, found floating in the ocean. Her husband is still alive and still a suspect. Until then, stay curious.